Hi students, let's go to session 4 of chapter solutions. In this session we are stepping into a whole new topic called vapor pressure of solutions. Now I'll be starting off with the school. Do all of you know the difference between boiling and evaporation of a liquid? That is my first question, which of course is from school. Try to answer yourself and let me also quickly recap this. Okay. See, if you have a vessel containing some liquid, any liquid for that matter, now in both boiling, both cases of boiling and evaporation, this liquid change into vapor, the liquid change into vapor, no doubt about it. So, I have a liquid in a vessel or in a water body like rivers, oceans, lakes, etc., wherein the liquid is changing to vapor state. Now, if the liquid changes to vapor state only from surface, you call it evaporation. So, evaporation is a surface phenomenon. Only surface liquid will be evaporating. Whereas, in boiling, what happens? Bulk of the liquid means I take 1 liter, entire 1 liter vessel will be emptied. I take 10 liters, entire 10 liters will be emptied. I take 1000 liters, entire 1000 liters will be emptied. So, if liquid changes to vapor only from the surface of the liquid, then you call it evaporation. Whole bulk of the liquid changes to vapor, you call it boiling. Then, evaporation can occur at any temperature, whether this vessel is in a hot sun or this vessel is in a refrigerator or it is being burnt from below, it is being heated from below, so in whatever the conditions, at whatever the temperature, the surface liquid will surely be evaporating, whereas boiling occurs at a specific temperature called boiling point of the liquid. Means I have to start heating the liquid, and then if I am putting thermometer into that liquid, thermometer should start showing a constant temperature, which for this liquid will be called boiling point of that liquid. At that temperature only, while thermometer is showing constantly that particular reading. Most popular example, water you take. Thermometer is consistently showing a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, being the pressure, being the normal pressure, that is 1 atmosphere, showing consistently 100 degrees Celsius, entire vessel empties. Or if I take ethyl alcohol, the thermometer showing consistently 54 degrees Celsius, the entire vessel empties. Likewise, at a specific temperature, if the whole bulk of the liquid changes to vapor state, you call it boiling. At a specific temperature called boiling point of the liquid. Whereas at any temperature from the surface of the liquid, if it happens, you call it evaporation. This is a very slow process, whereas this is a rapid process. Means once the boiling point is reached, within no time, the entire bulk of the liquid is evaporated, whereas this one happens indefinitely and happens very slowly. Last, most important, the logic behind evaporation and the logic behind boiling. See, if you have billions of molecules in this liquid, all of them do not possess same energy. Though using Maxwell's distribution curves, we may say average kinetic energy of the molecules of a given sample is constant. Each molecule possesses different kinetic energy. Now, the molecules with more kinetic energy in the bulk cannot remain in the bulk because they are highly energetic. See, you have got lot of energy, you are very vibrant, you want to go out and do something, and someone is restricting you at home or locking you down at home. Will you be very happy? Current situation, of course. So you want to, get out, run away, do something, show your vibrancy. Same way here also, highly kinetic energy molecules from the bulk cannot stay for a long time in the bulk, so they travel to the surface. And from surface, they enter into vapor state very easily. So the logic behind evaporation or the theory behind evaporation is more molecules with higher kinetic energy travel to the surface, and because their kinetic energy is sufficient enough to be changed to vapor state. So the particles, the liquid molecules having sufficient energy to change into vapor state reach the surface, and from there they change to vapor state, enter into the atmosphere if it is an open vessel, or remain as vapors and at some point attain equilibrium with the liquid if it is a closed vessel. We'll talk about it immediately. When it comes to boiling, what exactly is happening? See, from above, the atmosphere is exerting some pressure. Generally, normal atmospheric pressure is 1 atmosphere. And from below, liquid is exerting some pressure which is called vapor pressure. Okay, maybe the logic of boiling I'll teach you after introducing vapor pressure. Don't worry. So, hope you are so far clear about, because I wanted you to be very clear about the difference between the two aspects, and I want you to be very clear about evaporation particularly, so I quickly reminded you. I know most of you must be knowing it, so school is over. Now let us go to your first year, where you had the introduction to the meaning of vapor pressure of a liquid in the chapter called States of Matter. After gaseous state, you talked about liquid state. Right? There we learnt vapor pressure. That I'll recap quickly once. Okay? Because every liquid evaporates at any given temperature, every liquid exerts vapor pressure if kept in closed vessel. If kept in open vessel, it is escaping, that's a different story. But in literature, we have vapor pressures of every liquid at various temperatures because we need to determine them to understand the nature of the liquid. Okay, what nature of liquid can be expressed by knowing the values of vapor pressure? I'll talk about it. First, let us understand what is vapor pressure. Okay, consider a closed vessel which is fitted with a manometer. You know very well, manometer is a device used for measuring gaseous pressures. It is a J-shaped glass tube having a smaller limb and a larger limb, and to start with, it will have mercury to equal levels on both the limbs, larger as well as smaller limbs. Now, this will be connected to glass bulbs containing gases or cylinders containing gases. In this case, we are connecting it to a vessel containing liquid because we want to measure the pressure exerted by the vapors produced by this liquid. We will understand it. Now, assume in this closed vessel, there is a liquid, any liquid, please. As soon as I say liquid, people have a tendency to imagine water, but not water, not only water, any liquid for that matter is kept in this closed vessel. Now, as I already told you, at any given temperature, by the way. So, as I already told you, the liquid starts evaporating. Okay, so I will show the molecules of liquid in their vapor phase as some small circles. Okay, so from liquid phase the molecules are entering into vapor phase. So liquid is changing to vapor. This is evaporation, you know it. Now, because these vapor molecules which are produced from this liquid have nowhere to go, they will be coming back and trying to exert pressure on the surface of this liquid itself. Now, when they come and strike the surface of the liquid, some of them may lose their kinetic energy. Relatively, because the liquid molecules here may have lower kinetic energy. I already told you just now, those which are capable of evaporating, those which have kinetic energy enough to change to vapor state would have gone to vapor state. That means the molecules in the liquid have lower kinetic energy than them. So when they strike continuously the surface, there is every chance they lose kinetic energy and change back to liquid state. In vapor state, they have more energy. Now when the energy is less, they may become sluggish and change to liquid state. So the reverse process, as you popularly know from school, is called condensation or liquefaction. So The forward process is evaporation, the backward process is condensation, happening continuously, no doubt about it. But initially, for a long time, rate of evaporation will be greater than rate of condensation, because in bulk liquid is very large in quantity, vapors will be very small in quantity. Now, depending upon temperature, depending upon nature of liquid, depending upon various factors which I will be listing out, after some point, as time progresses, rate of evaporation goes on decreasing because the amount of liquid is decreasing. Rate of condensation goes on increasing because the density of vapors, the concentration of vapors or concentration of molecules in the vapor phase is increasing. So at some point, which depends at what concentration or after what quantity evaporating, depends on various factors like nature of liquid, temperature, surface area of the vessel, many things. So rate of evaporation becomes equal to rate of condensation, which you know very well, we call it as equilibrium. Now when this happens, you say the liquid and vapor are in equilibrium with each other. Liquid and vapor are in equilibrium with each other. Now, what is the duty of manometer here? How is it helping us? See, as the concentration of vapors goes on increasing here, the level of mercury goes on rising. As I told you, initially since rate of evaporation is greater than rate of condensation, the concentration of vapors goes on increasing. Means if 10 molecules of liquid become vapor, maybe 2 molecules of vapor must be becoming liquid. So there is net gain of 8 vapor molecules. As a result, number of vapor molecules increase. So pressure exerted by vapors on this manometer will increase. So the level of mercury in manometer goes on increasing. Now, the rate of increase goes on decreasing as time progresses, because slowly rate of condensation is becoming more, rate of evaporation is becoming less. And at some point both become equal. That means if 10 liquid molecules change to vapor phase, 10 vapor molecules will change to liquid phase. At such point exactly, this mercury level becomes stagnant. Now, the pressure noted at this point, where rate of evaporation has become equal to rate of condensation, liquid and vapor have entered into equilibrium with each other. Then at such equilibrium of liquid vapor, the pressure exerted by vapors of liquid on the surface of liquid is called as vapor pressure of that liquid. So please understand, manometer shows a constant reading. Constant reading by manometer clearly indicates that yes, rate of evaporation has become equal to rate of condensation, equilibrium is reached. So the point at which equilibrium has reached, what pressure vapors are exerting on the surface of the liquid is called vapor pressure of the liquid. So pressure exerted by vapors of a liquid on its surface during liquid vapor equilibrium is called vapor pressure of liquid. Okay. What does vapor pressure account for? See, there is a property called volatility for liquids. Volatility of liquids. What do you mean by volatility of liquids? Tendency to evaporate is called volatility. Means any liquid, I know I am teaching something very familiar to you, but keeping in view all the students, I am doing this. Okay. So tendency of a liquid to evaporate readily is called volatility. So a liquid which readily evaporates is said to be more volatile. A liquid which less readily evaporates is said to be less volatile. Now tell me, how is value of vapor pressure of a liquid related to its volatility? A liquid which exhibits more vapor pressure is said to be more volatile. For the simple reason that because it is more volatile, by the time liquid vapor equilibrium is attained, more amount of liquid would have evaporated, more concentration of vapors will be there in the vapor phase. As a result, more pressure it exerts. So A more volatile liquid exerts more vapor pressure at any given temperature. Point number 1. Now then, just now I was telling you the logic behind boiling point, right? The correct definition of boiling point, of course. You should have studied in school that a constant temperature at which liquid completely changes to vapor state is called boiling point. That in your first year you would have modified that definition actually. Let me remind you that definition. Okay. See, now I have started boiling the liquid by starting to heat it. Now from atmosphere, generally normal atmospheric pressure is 1 atmosphere. So let us assume there is normal atmospheric pressure. Atmosphere is trying to exert a pressure of 1 atmosphere on this liquid. Meanwhile, while undergoing evaporation, this liquid is building some vapor pressure. Now, why the whole of liquid is unable to change to vapor state? Because atmosphere is preventing from doing it. Pressurizing the liquid and reducing the freedom of the liquid molecules to enter into vapor state. Now, from down, what are we doing? Providing kinetic energy of the molecules to combat the atmospheric pressure. So by gaining kinetic energy, by changing into vapor state, by exerting vapor pressure, the liquid is trying to combat the atmospheric pressure. And at some point, say initially liquid had 0.1 atmospheres as its vapor pressure. As you keep on heating, as more and more molecules from the bulk are attaining kinetic energy to change into vapor state, as the concentration of vapors here is increasing, vapor pressure is slowly increasing, so became 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 and finally reached 1 atmosphere. Now when the vapor pressure of liquid itself reached the atmospheric pressure, means balance of forces. Now nobody can stop liquid, nobody is able to hold liquid from changing into vapor state. And that's when whole of the liquid changes to vapor state. Hence, boiling point can be defined as the constant temperature at which vapor pressure of liquid becomes equal to that of atmospheric pressure. Vapor pressure of liquid becomes equal to that of atmospheric pressure. This temperature at which vapor pressure of liquid becomes equal to that of atmospheric pressure is called boiling point of that particular liquid. Right. Now tell me, how will be boiling point and volatility related? How will be boiling point value and vapor pressure be related? Again, the logic is simple. If the liquid doesn't evaporate readily, means if it is not volatile enough, then it takes more temperature to evaporate. That means a liquid exhibiting more boiling point is less volatile. Less volatile means its vapor pressure will be less. So vapor pressure will be inversely proportional to the boiling point. Means a liquid with lower vapor pressure exhibits more boiling point because it is not volatile, it is not ready to evaporate. A liquid with higher vapor pressure exhibits less boiling point because it is highly volatile, ready to change into vapor state, so doesn't take more energy or much temperature for that conversion. Okay, that is the relation between vapor pressure and volatility, vapor pressure and boiling point. Now, the factors affecting vapor pressure. First, majorly I should talk about nature of liquid, and this is the reason why I was talking at length to you about intermolecular interactions, and I gave them to you in the decreasing order of their strength also, which interactions are strongest, which interactions are weakest. First, let us talk about, in nature of liquid, what we need to talk about: intermolecular interactions in liquid, intermolecular attraction forces in liquid. Now tell me, a liquid with stronger forces of attraction between its molecules will exhibit more vapor pressure, or a liquid with weaker intermolecular attraction forces will exhibit more vapor pressure? You are absolutely right. The one with weaker interparticle attractions will exhibit more vapor pressure, because if already attractions are weak, small amount of energy is sufficient to change into vapor state. So such liquid will be exhibiting. So a liquid with weaker interparticle forces will exhibit more vapor pressure, and such liquid will be volatile. We will be getting examples, don't worry. However, I'll give you some practical examples now. Say suppose I have given you water, ethyl alcohol, some popular liquids I am giving you, water, ethyl alcohol, octane. Octane is petrol, octane isooctane is petrol. Tell me, you know practically very nicely, tell me out of these three, which ones has highest boiling point, which one has lowest boiling point? I have written them in the decreasing order of their boiling points only. Water has highest boiling point, octane has lowest boiling point. Now, which means boiling point highest means vapor pressure must be lowest for this, highest for this. Now, why among these three octane has highest vapor pressure, water has lowest vapor pressure? So simple. Octane is a hydrocarbon. The forces that are holding the particles are London forces, which are weakest among all the interparticle attractions. You know that very well. Whereas in water, the interparticle forces are intermolecular hydrogen bonds. See, among the interparticle attractions, among covalent molecules, intermolecular hydrogen bonds are the strongest. Try to remember my previous session, and that is why I took so much time for that. Now, and this also exhibits intermolecular hydrogen bonds only, ethanol also, but because there is a hydrocarbon radical, the strength of intermolecular hydrogen bonding will be lesser in this compared to this. So, because it is having strongest interparticle interactions, water has lowest vapor pressure, hence exhibits highest boiling point, least volatile. Whereas this is having weakest forces, so exhibits highest vapor pressure, so lowest boiling point, most volatile. That is the effect of nature of liquid on vapor pressure of a liquid. That is effect of interparticle forces. Now, the second factor I need to discuss here is the temperature. Now tell me, same liquid if you take, at higher temperature would it exhibit more vapor pressure or at lower temperature? Obviously, increase in temperature would increase the kinetic energy of the more number of particles would attain higher kinetic energy to reach vapor phase. So by the time equilibrium attained, more vapors will be produced at a higher temperature compared to lower temperature. So vapor pressure is directly proportional to temperature, whereas it was inversely proportional to intermolecular interactions. Okay. Number 3, surface area of liquid. See, if I take in a narrow mouthed vessel, will it exhibit more vapor pressure? Or if I take a wide mouthed vessel, it will exhibit more vapor pressure. I have already established the point that evaporation is a surface phenomenon. So more the density of molecules on the surface, greater will be the extent of evaporation. Now, if you take a wider mouthed vessel, automatically the density of surface molecules will be more, so extent of evaporation will be greater, so vapor pressure exhibited will be obviously more. So likewise, these are the various aspects of vapor pressure. We understood vapor pressure of the liquid. We understood what is the relation between vapor pressure and volatility. We understood what is the relation between vapor pressure and boiling point. And we understood what factors influence the magnitude of vapor pressure of a given liquid. More volatile liquids like octane, acetone, which you know very well evaporate very readily, exhibit more vapor pressure, whereas the liquids like water which don't evaporate readily exhibit less vapor pressure. Okay. We had a small review exercise in your EPL, review exercise 2.3, to check our understanding of vapor pressure so that further learning of concepts becomes convenient and easy. See, there are 4 liquids and their vapor pressure values are given. Liquids are named as ABCD at some temperature. Now he is asking you to arrange them in the decreasing order of strength of intermolecular attractions. Decreasing order means strongest first, weakest last. Now, just now we established that stronger the intermolecular forces, lesser the vapor pressure. So, the one with lowest vapor pressure would have strongest intermolecular attractions. The one with highest vapor pressure would have weakest intermolecular attractions. So start with lowest vapor pressure, which is that C. So decreasing order you want, C is having strongest intermolecular interactions because it is exhibiting lowest vapor pressure. Because attraction forces are strong, not readily evaporating. When it doesn't evaporate readily, it exhibits lesser vapor pressure because the concentration of vapors by the time of equilibrium will be lesser. So second lowest is A. So it will have weaker interactions than C, stronger interactions than the next fellow, that is B, and weakest interactions will be for D because it is exhibiting the highest vapor pressure. Next, increasing order of volatility means, increasing order means lowest first, least volatile to most volatile. Now, to be volatile, vapor pressure should be high. So the one with highest vapor pressure, that is D, is most volatile. You want from least volatile to most volatile. The one with lowest vapor pressure, C, will be least volatile. So C is less volatile than A is less volatile than B is less volatile than D. Order is same, but the relation is different. So C is least volatile, D is most volatile. Most volatile liquid would have highest vapor pressure. Lastly, decreasing order of boiling points. Already we have established that boiling point and vapor pressure are inversely proportional. Very simple. The one exhibiting high vapor pressure indicates it is ready to evaporate. That means it is more volatile. More volatile liquid is supposed to have lesser boiling point. He is asking decreasing order, most volatile first. Decreasing order of boiling point. Decreasing order of boiling point means highest boiling point to lowest boiling point. The one with highest boiling point would have least vapor pressure. So the order would be same as the first one. C, A, B, D. C would have highest boiling point because it is exhibiting least vapor pressure. D would have lowest boiling point because it is exhibiting highest vapor pressure. That was question number 1 of your review exercise 2.3. Question number 2 of review exercise 2.3 is a direct theoretical question. You can answer that because I have already explained it. Okay. With this, we finish the fundamentals required to understand vapor pressure of solutions. To understand vapor pressure of solutions, we had to understand vapor pressure of a liquid first, pure liquid first. And to understand vapor pressure, you have to be clear with the differences between boiling point and evaporation. So we finished school as well as first year revision. Now let us enter into the present syllabus, your second PUC, vapor pressure of solutions. Okay. The context here in the discussion of vapor pressure of solutions is, just now we established that every liquid exerts some vapor pressure. Now, as a liquid, it has its vapor pressure which is decided by various factors which we understood. Inherently, the intermolecular attractions, and externally, the factors like temperature, surface area, boiling point and other things. Now, this liquid exerts so much vapor pressure. Now I used this liquid as a solvent, added a solute to it, prepared a solution. Now, whether the vapor pressure would be greater than that of the pure liquid or less than that of the pure liquid, what is this solute doing to the vapor pressure of this liquid is the discussion under vapor pressure of solutions. In that, the first topic is vapor pressure of solutions containing a non-volatile solute. Almost every liquid is volatile, whether it could be less volatile or more volatile. It may take less temperature to boil or more temperature to boil, but every liquid is volatile. So when I say non-volatile, it could be solid only, but not the solids like camphor, naphthalene, iodine, ammonium chloride, benzoic acid. You know very well, they are all called sublimable solids. So they are volatile solids. Here we are talking about non-volatile solids. Any other solids you take, glucose, urea, sugar, sodium chloride, any salts that we are talking about. Now, I took a liquid, added a non-volatile solid solute, and this liquid inherently had some pressure. Let us call it P naught. Vapor pressure of pure liquid, let me call it P naught. Now I have added a non-volatile solid solute to this liquid and prepared a solution. Let me call vapor pressure of solution of this liquid prepared by adding a non-volatile solid solute as P. Now the question here is, what is the relation between P naught and P? What is the relation between P naught and P? Let us understand that. Just now I have explained you very clearly that if now I am taking liquid molecules as small spheres. Now, just now I have explained you that assume it is a closed vessel. The surface molecules were changing into vapor phase. We'll do one thing. I'll take this as solid. Okay. I'll take this as small dots, the vapor molecules as small dots. Now I was telling you the surface molecules are changing into vapor state and becoming vapors. Right? Now, just now we discussed that more the density of particles in the surface, more will be the extent of evaporation, so greater will be the evaporation. Now what did I do? I have added a non-volatile solid solute. Now what will be the situation inside the liquid? What are these solid dots I am drawing there? They are nothing but the non-volatile solid solute particles. Now what happened? Whatever the surface area available to us is now occupied by both solids, non-volatile or unevaporating solid particles as well as the existing liquid particles. As a result, what happened? Density of liquid molecules on the surface has reduced. As a result, the number of liquid particles entering into vapor phase also reduces. As a result, the extent of evaporation also decreases. Conclusion: whenever a pure liquid is added with a non-volatile solid solute, the solution which is formed will have a less vapor pressure than the pure liquid. Why? The solute particles are occupying the surface. As a result, the density of liquid molecules in the surface will be reduced. Since evaporation is a surface phenomenon, since vapor pressure has to be built due to evaporation from surface, and that rate is decreasing, as a result, the vapor pressure also decreases. So, if I assumed vapor pressure of pure liquid as P naught and vapor pressure of solution as P, then P will be less than P naught. Now, two words have to be introduced at this point. One is lowering of vapor pressure. Let me call it LVP. That must be equal to P naught minus P, because P naught is larger, P is smaller. So how much vapor pressure has reduced is called lowering of vapor pressure, which will be P naught minus P. But the more important term to be remembered here is relative lowering of vapor pressure, which often abbreviated as RLVP, and relative lowering of vapor pressure is the ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of pure solvent. Ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of pure solvent. Lowering of vapor pressure is P naught minus P, vapor pressure of pure solvent is P naught, so RLVP, relative lowering of vapor pressure, is P naught minus P by P naught. So for solution containing non-volatile solid solutes, vapor pressure of solution will be lesser than the vapor pressure of pure solvent, and an important property called relative lowering of vapor pressure is expressed, which is the ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to the vapor pressure of pure solvent, given as P naught minus P by P naught. Assume the designations given are like this. Books may give different kinds of designations. So the symbol is not important for us. The meaning of the symbol is more important for us. That's why whenever you are learning formulae, whenever you are learning anything, please learn with the description of the symbol. Don't just try to memorize the symbols. You will be confusing in your mind or messing up. So hope the basic idea of vapor pressure of solution containing non-volatile solid solute is understood. Okay. we have a small learning exercise with two questions to acknowledge our understanding of the previous concept. Let us answer them. You try to answer them and then get back for the solutions. Okay. See, arrange the following liquids in the increasing order of their vapor pressure is the question. Acetone, alcohol, distilled water, normal saline. In them you can see acetone, alcohol, distilled water are pure liquids. Normal saline is a solution in which is prepared by adding sodium chloride to distilled water. You know that. Now the question is, first let us decide among these three, because among these two it's easy. Just now we understood. When you add a non-volatile solid solute, vapor pressure decreases. Sodium chloride is a non-volatile solid solute. So addition of sodium chloride would have decreased the vapor pressure of distilled water. So this would have lesser vapor pressure than this. No doubt about it. Already distilled water exhibits lower vapor pressure, but normal saline would have lower vapor pressure than this. So among these two it is clear. Now among these three we have to decide, and we want them in the increasing order. Means the one with lowest vapor pressure to the one with highest vapor pressure. Now acetone, this is the structure of acetone, and between acetone molecules the only possible interaction forces are dipole-dipole forces. Carbon electropositive, oxygen electronegative, so there will be polarity in this molecule, so forces will be dipole-dipole forces. Whereas in alcohol, any alcohol, it did not mention which alcohol it is, but any alcohol for that matter contains OH group. So between one alcohol and the other alcohol, if I write the structure of alcohol like this, ROH like this, between one alcohol and other alcohol molecule there will be intermolecular hydrogen bond. Electropositive hydrogen of alcohol, one alcohol, and electronegative oxygen of the other alcohol. And you know very well, intermolecular hydrogen bonds are stronger than dipole-dipole forces. In this case what we have are dipole-dipole forces. Now that way if you see, water is having stronger intermolecular hydrogen bonds than this. Now just now we understood, stronger the intermolecular forces, lesser the vapor pressure. Now among these three, the strongest intermolecular forces are for distilled water. So distilled water would exhibit least vapor pressure because attraction forces are strong. Now among distilled water and normal saline, because of addition of non-volatile solid solute, this would even exhibit lesser. So 4 will be lowest since you need increasing order, followed by 3, followed by 2, followed by 1. 1 would exhibit the highest vapor pressure, 4 would exhibit the least vapor pressure. Okay, that is question number 1. Question number 2, another simple straight question. Ethanol was exhibiting a vapor pressure of 75 millimeters of mercury, and they have added potassium hydroxide into it, which is again a non-volatile solid solute. Then what would happen to the vapor pressure of the solution, they are asking. You know very well, vapor pressure must be less than 75. One option is equal to 75, it can't be equal, and one option is 82, which is larger than 75, so our answer is 64. Option D cannot be identified is wrong, we can easily identify. So upon adding non-volatile solid solute, vapor pressure of a liquid decreases. To establish that, we have taken these two examples. Understood? Now let us get into a very, very important quantitative relationship between vapor pressure of the solution and composition of the solution. Okay, in the form of a very, very, very famous law called Raoult's law. Okay, a French scientist named Francois Maltraut has given a quantitative relationship that explains how vapor pressure of a solution changes with the composition of the solution. See, I can add any quantity of solute to prepare a solution, right? Now, how relative proportions of solute and solvent in a solution affects the vapor pressure of that solution. And we are talking about Raoult's law for solutions containing non-volatile solute. See, under vapor pressure of solutions, we are going to study two kinds of solutions. One in which a liquid added with a non-volatile solid solute, second one in which liquid added with a liquid solutions. We have a Raoult's law for liquid solutions also, because the behavior will be different. Now this is the Raoult's law we are talking about for solutions containing non-volatile solid solute. Clear? Now children, it's very simple and easy, nothing difficult. Just tell me, you will only be stating Raoult's law now. Just tell me, in a solution, whose proportion should be larger for vapor pressure of solution to be larger? See, solution means liquid plus solid, non-volatile solid we have added. Such solutions we are talking about. Now, I have already explained you what happens to the vapor pressure of the solution. Now, my question to you is, in a given solution, for that solution to exhibit more vapor pressure, how should be the relative proportions of solute and solvent? More proportion of solvent will make it have more vapor pressure, or more proportion of solute will make it have more vapor pressure? Your analysis is absolutely correct. Just now we established that addition of non-volatile solid solute decreases vapor pressure, means smaller the quantity of solute, better for the vapor pressure. That means proportion of solvent should be larger. That means vapor pressure exhibited by a solution is directly proportional to the fraction of the solvent. Of course, inversely proportional to the fraction of the solute. More the fraction of the solute, lesser will be the vapor pressure, but more the fraction of the solvent, more will be the vapor pressure. Means I add lesser solute, I keep more proportion of solvent, more will be the vapor pressure exerted, because solute is coming and reducing the vapor pressure. That is what is the statement of Raoult's law. Now let me put it into sentences, a mere formality. Vapor pressure of a solution containing non-volatile solid solute, vapor pressure of a solution containing non-volatile solute is directly proportional to the mole fraction of solvent. Directly proportional to the mole fraction of solvent at a given temperature. Obviously, we will be talking about a constant temperature. So, he is telling greater the mole fraction of solvent, more will be the vapor pressure exhibited by that solution, because solute is trying to reduce the vapor pressure. So, P, if you assume vapor pressure of solution as P is directly proportional to XA, assuming that I am calling solute as B and solvent as A, let us assume. I am calling solute as B and solvent as A. Then you can simply say vapor pressure of solution is directly proportional to XA. Now, the proportionality constant in this case is going to be P naught. What is P naught here? We have just assumed P naught as the vapor pressure of pure solvent. Means before preparing solution, as a pure liquid, it has some vapor pressure P naught. After adding solute, its vapor pressure has reduced, and that is vapor pressure of solution P. Now, the proportion vapor pressure of solution is directly proportional to mole fraction of solvent. More the fraction of solvent, more will be the vapor pressure of solution, and the proportionality constant will be P naught. A quick understanding of how we can consider vapor proportionality constant as P naught I will give you here, though it is not very important. See, P is equal to Kxa, I can say, where K is some proportionality constant. Now assume pure state of liquid. If you assume pure state of liquid, P will be equal to P naught and Xa will be equal to 1. Because mole fraction is sum of the fractions of solute as well as solvent, and that will always be, maximum value will be 1. Now, since you don't have any solute, mole fraction will be 1. So, P naught is equal to K into 1 it is going to be. Therefore, K is equal to P naught. That is how I can take P naught as the proportionality constant K. Clear? So, vapor pressure of solution is equal to vapor pressure of pure solvent into mole fraction of the solvent when I add a non-volatile solute to a given liquid. Is that clear? This is the statement of Raoult's law and the mathematical expression for Raoult's law. Now, the same Raoult's law can be expressed in a slightly different meaning. Though, end of the day, the conclusion will be the same. Okay? See, you know very well, mole fraction of solute Xb plus mole fraction of solvent Xa should be equal to 1. Therefore, Xa should be equal to 1 minus Xb. Sum of the mole fractions of solute and solvent should be equal to 1. It is familiar to you. So, Xb plus Xa is equal to 1. So, Xa is equal to 1 minus Xb. Let me substitute here. P is equal to P naught into 1 minus Xb. Take P naught inside. P is equal to P naught minus P naught Xb. Okay. Now what happens? P naught Xb will be equal to P naught minus P. Xb is equal to P naught minus P by P naught. Now, what is this expression P naught minus P by P naught? I just told you it is called relative lowering of vapor pressure. It is called relative lowering of vapor pressure. Now, what is Xb? Mole fraction of the solute. So, the new definition of or new statements of Raoult's law could be, don't mind, I'll write it here in small letters. Relative lowering of vapor pressure, I'm writing it as an abbreviation. Relative lowering of vapor pressure of a solution having non-volatile solute is equal to, here we are talking about proportionality, here we are saying it is equal to mole fraction of solute. And children, please just don't by heart the formulae. Please understand the physical meaning of them. See, solute, non-volatile solute is reducing the vapor pressure. Correct? So, lowering in vapor pressure is depending upon mole fraction of the solute, whereas vapor pressure is directly depending upon mole fraction of the solvent. More the mole fraction, more will be the more the mole fraction of solvent, more will be the vapor pressure. More the mole fraction of solute, more will be lowering in vapor pressure, because solute is causing lowering in vapor pressure. Is that clear? That is statements, two statements as well as mathematical expressions of Raoult's law. Entrance exam, no issues, you will be applying it directly. Or if in any theoretical question, if they ask you any theoretical questions, you may need it. In board exams, if they ask you statement of Raoult's law, you can write either of the statements and write either of the formulae, or if time permits, write both statements and both formulae. What's wrong? For 70 marks paper, you have got 3 or 15 minutes. Yes or no? So write both of them, nothing wrong. Okay? Now let us represent the relation graphically. Suppose on x-axis I am taking vapor pressure of solution, and on y-axis I am taking mole fraction, say. Now assume mole fraction is changing from 0 to 1. You know very well the highest value of mole fraction is 1. Let me take y-axis here also. Okay. Now as mole fraction of solvent I am talking about, be very clear. I am drawing a graph between vapor pressure of solution and mole fraction of solvent. Then 0 mole fraction of solvent is meaningless, but theoretically when mole fraction of solvent is 0, the vapor pressure of solution also will be 0, and as mole fraction of solvent goes on increasing, vapor pressure goes on increasing and reaches its maximum value. Now this graph has to be understood from the other direction, reverse actually. Why? Here the mole fraction of solvent is 0, here the mole fraction of solvent is 1. Means highest mole fraction of solvent we are talking about. When mole fraction of solvent is 1 means what does it mean? Mole fraction of solvent 1 indicates that it is pure solvent, no solute added. That's why the whatever the vapor pressure value you get here is nothing but P naught. So This point of vapor pressure at mole fraction of solvent equal to 1 represents the vapor pressure of pure solvent, so P naught. Now as you come towards the left, what does it mean? The vapor mole fraction of solvent is decreasing. Means I am adding solute, adding solute, adding solute, more and more solute, more and more solute. Of course, having only solute and no solvent is practically not possible. But up to this point, if you assume also, I went on increasing the fraction of solute. When I went on increasing the went on adding the solute, when mole fraction of solvent went on decreasing, the vapor pressure of solution also went on decreasing. So, when it was pure solvent, it had highest vapor pressure. As the mole fraction of solvent decreased, means as the solute is kept on adding, the vapor pressure went on decreasing. This is the meaning of this particular curve or graph that you got here. And of course, why you are getting a straight line passing through the origin? Relation is P is equal to P naught into XA, that is Y is equal to MX. Because it represents the straight line equation Y is equal to MX, you got a straight line passing through the origin. Is that clear? That is Raoult's law for the solutions containing non-volatile solute. Vapor pressure of solutions containing non-volatile solute. Now, I should actually move to vapor pressure of solutions containing liquid, two liquids. Means into one liquid I have added another liquid. Binary liquid solutions we call them. But I will not jump into that because using this formula particularly, when the addition of non-volatile solid is added, happened, I want you to get that numerical exercise for this category before going to liquid solutions. In your entrance corner 2.5, actually both categories the numericals are given together. But I am taking up the numericals related to solutions of non-volatile solute. Let us finish that. Then we will enter into liquid solutions and we will solve those numericals separately so that an immediate illustration helps you understand the formula better. Though it is a simple formula, you should know how to apply, right? So immediate illustration will be better. So go to entrance corner 2.5 of your EPL. Question number 1 to 5 are related to non-volatile solid solute. Let us solve them. Okay. Look at question number 1. He has considered aqueous glucose. You know formula of glucose is C6H12O6. He has given concentration of aqueous glucose solution as 10% by mass. That means he has given you mass percentage. See, you please observe. Though thinking that you know it from first year or they must have done before lockdown, I skipped the concentration terms. But don't worry, the concentration terms keep repeating. The concentration terms keep getting revised. Already while solving Henry's law problem also, mole fraction to molarity, molarity to mole fraction, etc. we were doing. Similar task here. In the Raoult's law, we have mole fraction of solvent. And here you have got mass percentage. So we will have to convert mass percentage to mole fraction and then do the solution. So automatically concentration terms keep getting revised. Okay. See, please observe. At 303 Kelvin, vapor pressure of pure water is 32.8 millimeters of mercury. And by adding glucose to this pure water, he has prepared a 10% by mass solution. What would have happened to the vapor pressure of solution? 32.44, 62.44, 150, 252. Options are quite far away and very comfortable also. I'll show you how. Not much calculation required. So here, step 1 is convert mass percentage to mole fraction. This you need to do first. Okay, now observe. 10% by mass implies, what is the definition of mass percentage? Number of parts by mass of solute in every 100 parts by mass of solution. So number of grams of solute in 100 grams of solution. So he's saying 10% by mass, that means 10 grams of glucose in 100 grams of solution we are talking about. Means glucose plus water must be 100 grams. Means water must be 90 grams. So you can understand weight of glucose here is 10 grams and weight of water here is 90 grams. Now number of moles of glucose would be 10 by 180. because mass divided by molar mass, glucose C6H12O6, add all the atomic masses, you will get 180. Then number of moles of water would be 90 by 18 because 18 is the molecular mass of water. Let us simplify this. If you simplify 10 by 180, you will get 0.0556 actually. So I can take 0.056. And to get number of moles of water, 90 by 18, it is simply 5. Now children, without further doing any calculation, can we tell the answer? I'll stop the process here and we have to get the answer. Try to get it, pausing the video, come back. See, if you notice, number of moles of solvent are so large compared to number of moles of solute. 0.056 and 5, huge difference, which indicates mole fraction of solvent is very high. It will be 0.99, you calculate, you will get. Almost it will be close to 0.99, it will be 0.11 something. So, negligible mole fraction of solute, very large mole fraction of solvent, which indicates that the vapor pressure of solution should be very close to the pure solvent itself because he has added nominal quantity of solute in a given quantity of solvent. Now come here. Vapor pressure of pure water is how much? 32.88. Which option is closest to it? I will do the whole calculation for you to get the same answer. We can check now. Now, to do step 2, that is finding vapor pressure of solution by the formula P is equal to P naught into XA. I need the mole fraction of solvent, right? What is mole solvent here? Water. So mole fraction of water should be equal to number of moles of water divided by total number of moles. What will be total number of moles? 5.056. 5.056 is not even close to 5.1. That means it will be coming almost equal to 1. So I can say it will be 0.999 something. Yes or no? Now substitute here. P naught 32.8 he said into 0.999 something. 0.99 is almost equal to 1. So obviously you must get 32.44 millimeters of mercury. Was the problem easy? See, basic formula of Raoult's law is simple and straight. Vapor pressure of solution containing non-volatile solid solute is equal to vapor pressure of pure solvent into mole fraction of the solvent. So I need mole fraction of the solvent, for which you need weight of solute, weight of solvent, from which you will calculate number of moles and substitute number of moles in the formula of mole fraction. You must be knowing the formula of mole fraction. So mole fraction of water here is equal to number of moles of water by number of moles of water plus number of moles of glucose. Substitute in that formula, put it here and do it and get this answer. And without even solving, we can easily say because options are very comfortable. Let's move on to question number 2. Another similarly dissimilar question. Vapor pressure of pure water is given at some temperature and previously has given mass percentage of the solution containing glucose, which is a non-volatile solid solute. This time he has given you molality of the solution. As usual, vapor pressure of the solution you want and pressures are given in kilopascals. See, previously we converted mass percentage to mole fraction. Now we have to convert molality to mole fraction. So, and in second step substitute the mole fraction of the solvent and then get your answer. Now, as usual, step 1, convert molality to mole fraction, right? Now let me remind you the definition of molality. Molality is nothing but number of moles of solute per kilogram of solvent, as you remember. So molality is the expression in which we take solvent separately, solvent individually, right? Now, not the total solution. Now, 1 molal implies, from this definition, 1 molal implies that 1 mole of solute dissolved in how much of water? Kg, which I will write it in grams as 1000 grams of water. Now it is pretty clear, number of moles of solute, I'll call solute as B, solvent as A, then number of moles of solute is 1, number of moles of solvent, that is water, 1000 divided by 18. Yesterday we established molarity of water will be 55.56 moles per liter, because 1000 divided by 18 will give you 55.56. So solute is 1 mole, solvent is 55.56 moles. To determine the vapor pressure of solution, you need mole fraction of solvent as per the formula. So mole fraction of solvent I am calculating. XA is equal to Na by Na plus Nb, that is 55.56 by 1 plus 55.56, which is 55.56 by 56.56. Children, again please observe, 55 moles of solvent, 1 mole of solute. Obviously, the mole fraction of solvent will come very close to 1, some 0.9 or something. When it is coming very close to 1, obviously the vapor pressure of solution should be very close to that of pure solvent. How much is the vapor pressure of pure solvent? 12.3 kilopascals. How many options you have closest to it? Obviously you will get the same. So 55.56 divided by 56.56, if you do, you will again get something close to 0.9, whatever the second digit you get, I don't mind. Now step 2, vapor pressure of solution is equal to vapor pressure of pure solvent into mole fraction of the solvent. Vapor pressure of pure solvent is given 12.3 kilopascals into mole fraction comes somewhere around 0.95 or 96, whatever you got it. I don't even care. Will you get anything closer than that? So obviously your answer will be 12.08 kilopascals. That is question number 2. Almost first and second questions were almost similar. Let's move on to question number 3. Go through question number 3. In octane solvent, some non-volatile, it could be non-polar solvent or solute also, because octane is a non-polar solvent. A non-polar, non-volatile solid solute with a molecular mass 40 is dissolved in 114 grams of octane. Then the solution exhibited vapor pressure, which is a solution of vapor pressure of solution reduced to 80%. Okay. Then mass of solute that should be used to change the vapor pressure to 80%. That is the question he is asking. 80 grams, 8 grams, 60 grams, 10 grams. Okay. Now, see, it is very clearly given here that P is equal to 80% of P naught. P is equal to 80% of P naught. If you simplify, you will get it as 0.8 P naught. Now we have again 2 steps here. Step 1, find the mole fraction from Raoult's law. Reverse. Previously, we found mole fraction from the given percentages or molarity, and we use the Raoult's law for calculation of vapor pressure. Here he has given change in vapor pressure, asking the mass of the solute. That's why from this P naught and P values we will find mole fraction. From mole fraction we will try to find the weight of the solute. Okay. So we have, so I can write 0. Let me remind you the Raoult's law. P is equal to P naught into XA. That is vapor pressure of pure solvent into mole fraction of solvent. So we established that P is equal to 0.8 times of P naught. So 0.8 times of P naught is equal to P naught into XA. Therefore XA is equal to 0.8 P naught by P naught, that is 0.8. So mole fraction of, sorry I kept the fan switched on, some noise would have disturbed you. However, mole fraction of solvent we understood it is 0.8, but we need weight of solute, right? So mole fraction of solute XB will be 1 minus mole fraction of solvent, it is going to be 0.2. Now we got the mole fraction of solute. Now we want the weight of solute. To get the weight of solute, we need the number of moles of solute. Yes or no? Now you see. Number of moles of solvent, first let us take Octane formula is C8H18. So for carbons 12 into 8 you will put 96 you will get. For hydrogen 18 into 1 you will put 18 you will get. 8 plus 6 14, 9 plus 2 11, you will get 114. So he has taken exactly molar mass many grams of a solvent. That's why 114 by 114 gives you 1 mole. So number of moles of solvent is 1 mole. Okay. Then number of moles of solute NB we want to find out. We already have the mole fraction of solute. Now the known formula is mole fraction of solute is equal to number of moles of solute by number of moles of solute plus number of moles of solvent plus number of moles of solute. Right. Mole fraction of solute is already established as 0.2. So 0.2 is equal to the unknown value, that is number of moles of solute, divided by, we established that number of moles of solvent is 1. So 1 plus number of moles of solute. Cross multiply. 0.2 plus 0.2 NB is equal to NB it is going to be. Let us take 0.2 this side. It becomes NB minus 0.2 NB, that will be 0.8 NB. So 0.2 is equal to NB minus 0.2 NB, that is 0.8 NB. Okay. Therefore, NB is equal to 0.2 by 0.8, that will be 1 by 4, that is 0.25 moles. So the solute used was 0.25 moles. Then last step I will do here. You want the weight of solute. He has given molar mass is 40. So 1 mole of solute is 40 grams. Therefore 0.25 moles is equal to how many grams? Nothing but 1/4. So 40 into 0.25 gives you 10 grams. Is that clear? So your answer is option D, 10 grams. Please understand, Raoult's law is a very small part of this problem. Frankly speaking, majority of this problem is mole concept only. As you can notice, in the first step using Raoult's law, we just found out mole fraction of solute as well as solvent. Now, we had to find number of moles of solute to find out its weight. So using the mole fraction formula, substituting all the values given, we found out number of moles of solute. From number of moles of solute and molar mass, we found the number of mass of solute in grams. And that was your final answer required. When I explain, it looks lengthy, but you understand this, put this video aside and try to solve yourself. You can do it just like that. Only thing is, you need command on the mole concept. Okay, let's move on to question number 4. Question number 4. Sulfur is dissolved in carbon disulfide, and after dissolution the concentration of solution happens to be 16% by mass. Again, mass percentage is given, and solution is exhibiting, means after dissolving it is exhibiting a vapor pressure of 50 millimeters of mercury. Then before dissolving, what would be the vapor pressure of pure solvent, he is asking. And if you look at the options smartly, only one option equal to 50 millimeters can be ruled out. Option C can be ruled out. You know very well P0 should be larger than P. And all the 3 options he has given larger than P only. So we cannot do any elimination method more than removing option C. So we don't have any choice. We have to do the calculation. Let us do that. Okay. Again, the issue is convert mass percentage to mole fraction. Unless you get mole fraction of solvent, you can't find out P0 using Raoult's law formula. So step 1 is percentage by mass to mole fraction, right? Now, what does mass percentage imply? So many grams of solute in 100 grams of solution. Solute plus solvent should be 100 grams. So 16% by mass implies 16 grams of solute, that is sulfur, I can write directly, 16 grams of sulfur in 100 grams of solution. So which implies clearly that weight of sulfur was equal to 16 grams and weight of carbon disulfide will be 100 minus 16. because total solution should be 100, so subtract the solute weight from that. 100 minus 16, which should be 84 grams. Now, you want mole fraction of carbon disulfide, for which, first let us calculate number of moles of sulfur. 16 by atomic mass of sulfur is 32, so let me take 32. 16 by 32, that is going to be 0.5. Then, molecular mass of carbon disulfide, let us calculate. Carbon 12, sulfur 12 into 1, 12, sulfur 32 into 2, 64, so total comes out to be 76. So number of moles of carbon disulfide will be 84 divided by 76, because we have already established that mass of carbon disulfide is 84. So if you divide number of 84 by 76 to get number of moles of carbon disulfide, you will get 1.11 something. Okay, now mole fraction of carbon disulfide is equal to number of moles of carbon disulfide divided by number of moles of sulfur plus number of moles of carbon disulfide. So 1.11 divided by 1.11 plus 0.5, which will be 1.61. Okay, 1.11 divided by 1.61, if you calculate, you will get the mole fraction of carbon disulfide. Let us substitute it here directly, no problem. So, vapor pressure of solution must be equal to vapor pressure of pure solvent into mole fraction of carbon disulfide, pure solvent. Therefore, vapor pressure of pure solvent, that is what we want, right, is equal to vapor pressure of solution divided by mole fraction of carbon disulfide. So, you will get 50 divided by 1.11 by 1.61. So, 50 into 1.61 divided by 1.11. You simplify and check, you will get the answer 72.46 millimeters. You can easily compare the answers until you need not worry about the calculation much. 1.11 is almost equal to 150 into 1.6 comes somewhere closest to 60 or 70. So this should be the nearest answer. Okay, that is question number 4. Now evaluate the information present in question number 5. Aqueous solution of a non-volatile solute which is prepared with a concentration of 2% by mass. Again, mass percentage is given. The pressure of this solution is, vapor pressure of this solution is 1.004 bar, it seems. Then he is asking molar mass of the solute. You can clearly understand here that to get molar mass of the solute, you need mole fraction of the solute. To get mole fraction of the solute, you need to calculate mole fraction of the solvent. That means, first I need to use step 1. First I need to use this formula P is equal to P naught into XA, that is mole fraction of solvent, so that I can get mole fraction of solute. XA is equal to P by P naught. 1 minus mole fraction of solvent gives me mole fraction of solute. From mole fraction of solute, like we did in one of the previous problems, we can calculate number of moles of solute and then find out its molar mass. Can be done, not an issue. But the question here now is, vapor pressure of solution is given 1.004 bar, then what about the vapor pressure of pure solvent? So, P is 1.004 bar, what about P naught? Children, the answer is simple. He has clearly mentioned at normal boiling point of solvent. Who is solvent here? Water. What is normal boiling point? Please understand. Boiling point shown by a liquid at normal atmospheric pressure is called normal boiling point. How much is normal atmospheric pressure? 1 atmosphere. So, at normal boiling point of solvent means he is indirectly telling you the pressure of vapor pressure of pure solvent is 1 atmosphere. Why? Only when vapor pressure of solvent becomes equal to the vapor pressure of atmospheric pressure, it reaches boiling point. I told you, right? The temperature reaches boiling point. That's what it is. So he is saying at normal boiling point, that means vapor pressure of liquid would have reached atmospheric pressure. And atmospheric pressure is how much? 1 atmosphere. But because solution pressure is given in bar, I should convert 1 atmosphere also to bar. and in bar 1 atmosphere will be 1.013 bar. You know this very well. Bar and atmosphere are very close to each other. 1.013 bar. Therefore, XA is equal to 1.004 divided by 1.013. Almost very close to each other, the mole fraction of solvent, so comes out to be 0.99 almost. So mole fraction of solute comes out to be 0.01. So first we have calculated mole fraction of solute. Then now you need number of moles of solute to find out the molar mass. Now you see, mole fraction of solute is nothing but number of moles of solute divided by number of moles of solvent plus number of moles of solute, right? Mole fraction you have already established, it is 0.01 is equal to number of moles of solute you need to calculate divided by what about number of moles of solvent, Na is equal to. To get that, we need to use this. Okay, so to get number of moles of solute and number of moles of solvent, we need to use this. I'll do the calculation at the bottom. Okay, so 2% by mass implies 2 grams of solute in 100 grams of solution. That means weight of solute should have been, I'll call it WB, should have been 2 grams. Weight of solvent, WA, should have been 98 grams. Solvent is water, you know. So number of moles of solvent will be, you know very well, weight is 98 divided by, its molecular weight is 18. 98 by 18 will give you number of moles of solvent. Okay, this gives you 18 5s are 90 if you put, so 4s approximately, so 5.44 recurring I think you will get, so 5.44 you take. 5.44 plus number of moles of solute which you need to calculate, cross multiply. 0.01 into 5.44 gives you 0.0544 plus 0.01 NB is equal to NB. Therefore, NB minus 0.01 NB. Okay, so 0.0544 will be equal to NB minus 0.01 NB, which will be 0.99 NB. Therefore, NB is equal to number of moles of solute is equal to 0.0544 divided by 0.99. It's 0.99 is almost equal to 1, so slightly more than 0.544 you may get. So 0.055 or 0.56 you may get. Right? I'm just approximating. Okay. Now, number of moles is nothing but weight divided by molar mass. Weight of solute by molar mass of solute. We have already established here that weight of solute is 2 grams. So, molar mass of solute is weight of solute divided by number of moles. Weight of solute we have established it as 2 grams already, divided by the number of moles you got here, 0.056. Just check what you get, that will be the molar mass of the solute. Okay, this is how, means if you notice all the 5 problems, the formula of Raoult's law is very simple. P is equal to P naught into XA. That was it. He is increasing the size of the problem by asking questions related to mole concept, that's all. So indirectly, most of these questions are mole concept questions only. Now, only thing you need to be careful is when you are randomly solving the problem. Now we are categorizing, that's easy for you. But when you are randomly solving the problem, only thing you need to observe is he is mentioning either non-volatile solute or he is taking examples like glucose, sodium chloride, urea, etc. where you recognize it's a non-volatile solute. Then the formula is P is equal to P naught into mole fraction of solvent. Using that and doing all the mole concept related calculations around it, we are getting our answers. Okay. In next session, we will be talking about vapor pressure of solutions in which a liquid is mixed in another liquid. There you can notice both components will be volatile. So how Raoult's law will be applied to it and various other technical concepts around it will be learned in the next session. Okay, all the best. Revise this for the weekend exams without fail. Thank you.